Guys, it's time. The NBA 2021 and 22 playoffs are finally here. They're going to start today. We have a lot of interesting matchups. And basically what I'm going to be doing in today's video is going through all my playoff predictions, filling out my entire bracket, and analyzing why I'm making the decisions that I'm going to be making. So let's just get right into it now. But before we do, if any of you guys here are new to the channel and haven't subscribed yet, which is probably the vast majority of you, make sure that you hit that subscribe button because I'm going to be uploading lots of content and analysis during the playoffs, and we're so close to 1,000 subscribers, which would help get my channel monetized, so it would be greatly appreciated if you guys could subscribe. With that being said, let's get into the video. Starting in the Eastern Conference, the first series we have here is the 1-seeded Heat versus the 8-seeded Hawks, who are rolling in after winning back-to-back games in the play-in tournament. And I think this is actually going to be a very close series, closer than a lot of people think, and ultimately I have the Heat in 6 here. Really, the whole series is going to depend on Clint Capella's health. He's a defensive anchor for the Hawks. He hyperextended his knee kind of in that play-in game last night, and I think that the Hawks offense could cause some problems for the Heat defense just because of how dynamic of an offense they have with Trae Young, the shooters and lob threats that they have on the floor, and the Bam Adebayo's defense is going to be really key in this series for the Heat as he's their anchor. He's very versatile, and watching the Hawks offense versus the Heat defense will definitely be entertaining, and I think the Hawks could steal a few games just based off of Trae Young's insane dominance and how good of a playoff player he really is. But ultimately I think the Heat's offense will be a little bit too much for the Hawks defense, especially if they don't have Capella, and that's why ultimately I think the Heat are going to take the series in 6. Next up, we got probably the closest first-round matchup between the Sixers and the Raptors, and if you guys watch my channel, you know I'm a Raptors fan, and while this might seem a little bit biased, I am going to take the Raptors here to win this series in 6. I think this team right here is probably the best in the NBA at having a team game plan to guard Joel Embiid. They do a good job of doubling him when they need to. They have a lot of kind of switchable, versatile defenders who might not be as big as Embiid, but guys like Scottie Barnes, OG Anunoby, Precious Achiuwa, Thaddeus Young, and even more can do a good job of alternating guarding Embiid. No one gets tired guarding him because of how they alternate, and we've seen this season how the Raptors have been able to have success against the Sixers because of that. Then offensively, I think that this Raptors offense, with the shooting and the depth that they have, and the two all-stars that they have now in Pascal Siakam and Fred VanVleet, are going to be able to match up well enough against the Sixers defense, which isn't as good as it's been in previous years. The Sixers still have a lot of firepower and star power and are going to get a couple of games here, but I'm going to take the Raptors in 6. This is going to be a really entertaining series. Next up, we got the Bucks versus the Bulls, and I was really high on the Bulls at one point in the season, but ever since Lonzo's been out for a while, their offense hasn't been looking the same. I don't see how they're going to match up and guard Giannis Antetokounmpo of the Bucks in this series, and they've been really cold recently, the Chicago Bulls, and the Bucks are peaking at the right time, and I'm going to take the Bucks in 5 here ultimately. This is a team coming off of an NBA championship. They have that experience. They have a very good defensive system. They're going to match up well. Drew Holiday can make it tough on a guy like DeMar DeRozan. Chris Middleton's a good defender. Giannis can probably single-handedly shut down this team's pick and roll, and while I still do think the Bulls are a good team, their offense is very well flowing. They get out in transition a lot. I think the Bucks are going to dominate this series on both ends of the floor, and that's why I have them winning in 5. And then the last first-round matchup here, we have the 2-seeded Celtics versus the 7-seeded Nets. This is a really interesting series. It's probably going to be the closest one, maybe even more close than the Raptors and Sixers. And I think this is the series that both teams are just going to go back and forth, but ultimately, I do have the Celtics winning this in 7 with their home court advantage. I mean, I feel like these teams are pretty evenly matched. I mean, Kevin Durant could dominate this series, but the Celtics do still have a dominant defense with their switchable style. Marcus Smart could match up against Kyrie. I think they're going to cause some problems for the Nets offense, but at the same time, the Nets could find some success this series on the interior scoring because the Celtics will be without Robert Williams. On the other side of the floor, the Nets do struggle defensively, and with the way the Celtics offense has been playing now, with their good ball movement, Jason Tatum playing like an MVP, their great three-point shooting, good pull-up three-point shooting, I think the Nets could struggle on that end of the floor, and that's ultimately the slight difference in the series and why I have the Celtics taking it in 7. So in the second round in the East, we would have the Heat versus the Raptors here. This would be a very entertaining series, I think. But again, I'm going to actually call the Raptors here. I know it seems biased. This is my first real upset that I'm calling. But we've seen throughout the regular season this year how the Raptors have definitely had the Heat's number. They match up well against them. I think the defensive system of the Raptors, with how switchable they are, how they play percentages well, how they can shrink the floor and recover out the shooters if they need to, I think that would match up very well, and I've seen it throughout the year match up well against a Jimmy Butler-led team who doesn't shoot the 3 that well, but they do have supporting guys that shoot the 3 well. I think an offense like that, the Raptors can guard well, and ultimately I think it's going to be really close. The Heat are still a very good team with a great defense. It could be a pretty low-scoring series, honestly. Both teams do a good job of getting out in transition, and it's very evenly matched, but ultimately I am going to go with the Raptors in 6 in this series. The other second round matchup will be the Bucks versus the Celtics. This is going to be a very close matchup. Both teams are great on both ends of the floor. The matchups, the X's and O's of the series will be very interesting to watch, and it'll be very close. But I am going to go with the defending champions here, and here's why. They have the best player in this series who's proved at this point that he can play in the big moments in the clutch, and I think he's going to do that again in Giannis Antetokounmpo. He's going to be the best player in the series and take over those close games when he needs to, and that's why I'm going to take the Bucks in 6. So this would set up an East final between the Raptors and the Bucks, and where have we seen this before? 2019, Raptors with Kawhi in their championship run beating the Bucks, but in this series, I think the Bucks are going to take this one in 6. I think it's going to be an interesting matchup, but I don't know if the Raptors this time around are going to be able to guard Giannis the way that they were in 2019. The Raptors still do know how to guard Giannis, build a wall in transition, make sure he can't get to the paint easily, but with how they're a little bit downsized, he might be able to do that a little bit easier this time. And if the Raptors are able to guard him, Giannis is a better playmaker now. He's able to kick it out on the perimeter, and the Bucks have way better shooting than they used to. So I see the Raptors defense struggling in this series, and on the other side of the floor, the Bucks still have a dominant defense. The Raptors don't have great interior scoring, and Giannis could own them there too. So again, I really think Giannis is going to show in really the playoffs overall this year that he's still probably the best player in the Eastern Conference and maybe the best player in the entire league still. Let's move on to the West. First matchup, we have the Suns versus the Pelicans. The Pelicans are on a roll right now, but they're definitely no match for the Suns. They might squeak a game in there. I've got the Suns winning in 5. On both ends of the floor, this team is probably a top 3 team offensively and defensively, and I just think they're going to be no match overall for the Pelicans. The next matchup is the 4-seeded Mavs versus the 5-seeded Jazz, and this is going to be a really interesting series. Luka's health is in question. He's probably going to miss game, or I think he's actually officially ruled out of game 1 of this series, which is today. But for the rest of the series, I do have the Mavericks taking this in 7, and they've got bounced in the first round both years, but their defense is different this year. I think that's the big difference for them. I think they could be kind of legitimate contenders this year and in the future, and they match up well against the Jazz defense, because this is a team here in the Jazz who's a really good interior defending team with Rudy Gobert down there being the best rim protector in the league, but the Mavericks are more of a perimeter team. They do run pick and rolls a lot, but at the same time, Luke is out there shooting a lot of step back threes, which is a high percentage shot for him. He's kicking it out to the perimeter to the shooters on this team a lot, and I think the Mavericks could definitely find some success here, but at the same time, the Jazz still do have a great offense led by Donovan Mitchell with good ball movement, but the Jazz have been cold lately. Overall, there's so many things to balance out here. It's going to be a close series, but I've got the Mavericks taking it in 7. Next up is the Warriors and the Nuggets, and this is going to be a really interesting series. I don't see really either team being able to effectively guard the other team defensively, because for the Nuggets, they have Nikola Jokic, and while the Warriors are a great overall defensive team, they don't really have that big guy, that big presence that can guard Jokic one-on-one, and when they start sending double teams towards him, that's going to open up a lot of other things on the floor because of how good of a playmaker Jokic is. But at the same time, the Nuggets don't have great depth. I don't know if they're going to be able to 100% keep up. And on the other side of the floor, how are the Nuggets' inexperienced defense going to keep up with the cutting, moving, shooting offense of the Warriors. So ultimately, I still do have the Warriors taking this one in 6. Last series in the first round in the West will be the Grizzlies and the Timberwolves, and this is going to be an interesting series. Two younger teams, energetic on the defensive end of the floor, good on rotations and getting deflections defensively. They have really improved a lot compared to last year, but I think the Grizzlies are still a step higher than the Timberwolves. Even though they have momentum coming into this, Ja Morant is still the best player in this series, in my opinion. The Grizzlies do have better, more consistent shooting, better, more consistent defense, and I think they'll take this one in 6, but it will be a fun series to watch. Second round matchup, first one will be the Suns and the Mavericks, and in my opinion, these are the two best teams in the West. I've expressed my opinion on that recently on the channel, but I am going to take the Suns in 6 here. Mikal Bridges is going to be a very difficult matchup for Luka Doncic, which the entire Mavs offense evolves around Luka, and if he can get going the way that he usually does, which he probably won't against Mikal Bridges, their offense won't be nearly as successful. Their defense still could find a little bit of success just because of how much they've improved with really every aspect of defense, but the mid-range killing and good shooting, good ball moving offense of the Suns is still going to find success against the Mavericks, and I think it will be decently close, but I still think the Suns are going to be able to take this, move on to the West Finals once again, and I think they'll take it in 6. Then we have the other second round matchup being the Warriors versus the Memphis Grizzlies. This might be a little bit of a hot take, but I'm actually going to go with the Memphis Grizzlies here, and I am going to take them in 7 over the Warriors. We've seen in the past how the Memphis Grizzlies have been able to beat the Warriors head to head, and the defense of the Grizzlies is a unique one. They're very energetic. They led the league in steals this year by almost a full steal per game, and that's going to be tough for the Warriors. The Warriors offense relies a lot on cutting and movement off the ball, and when the Grizzlies are getting in those passing lanes, getting steals with their young players, being energetic and just being able to just get a lot of deflections and steals and disrupt the flow of the Warriors offense, I think that's going to cause a lot of problems for them. At the same time, though, they still are dominant. Their defense is dominant as well, but I feel like Ja Morant is going to find a way to conquer this team and ultimately into Game 7 probably have a huge game. His little floater in the paint, his craftiness around the rim, his shooting getting better, and the Grizzlies supporting cast probably being a little bit better than the Warriors supporting cast. I think this is going to be a really close series, but I'm going with the Grizzlies. And unfortunately, all that for the Grizzlies to run into an insane Phoenix Suns team for a Western Conference final. And while these teams are decently evenly matched, I'm going to take the Suns actually in 5 in this series. Like I said throughout today's video, their offense and defense combined is just absolutely insane. They get out in transition well. Their mid-range killing offense is still dominant. This year it's been insane. They've been able to win without Devin Booker and Chris Paul. Even if they run into injuries, I still think they're going to dominate this series against the Grizzlies. Again, the Grizzlies defense is unique and could cause some problems for them, but I think a matchup of DeAndre Ayton and Jaren Jackson Jr., just with that playoff experience down low, Ayton's probably going to win that. On the other side of the floor with Memphis against the Suns defense, I don't think they've really run into a defense that's as good and as consistent as the Suns with just their rotations, their energy, their rim protection, and I just think the Suns are going to beat the Memphis Grizzlies pretty easily here, despite the Grizzlies having a great year. So this would set up a finals rematch between the Phoenix Suns and the Milwaukee Bucks. Last year, this was probably the most entertaining NBA Finals we've seen since 2016. I think it's going to happen again, but I think this is the Suns' year. We've seen this year how they're a much better team than they were last year, even though they made it to the finals last year. I think that they match up very interestingly against the Bucks. We saw last year how DeAndre Ayton was able to do a decent job against Giannis, and the Suns defense as a whole can crowd that paint and recover out to shooters, which is a great defensive matchup against the Bucks. And I just think this year is different. The Suns are coming out even more hungry, and while the Bucks are going to put up a fight and Giannis is probably going to prove again that he's one of, if not the very best player in the NBA, I think that this is the Suns' year to win that NBA championship. So there you guys have it. That's my 2022 playoffs bracket. And I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Comment down below your thoughts on my playoff predictions and who you think is going to win the 2022 NBA championship, and I'll see you all next video.